The air at 8,000 feet is thin and clean. Nothing like the jungle rot stink that clings to everything on Luzon. Lieutenant Robert Carlson banks his B-25 Mitchell into a lazy circle, and through the plexiglass nose, he sees it. Clark Air Base spread out below like a training film diagram of how to lose a war. 50 aircraft, maybe more. Zeros parked wingtip to wingtip in neat rows. Betty bombers lined up along the taxiway. Fuel drums stacked in pyramids near the hangars. The morning sun catches the aluminum skin of the fighters, making them gleam like fresh minted coins. Jesus Christ! His bombardier, Eddie Kowalski, whispers over the intercom. It's a turkey shoot. Carlson's done this before. Strafing runs on Japanese airfields from Rabaul to Manila. But he's never seen them parked this stupidly. This, carelessly. The intelligence brief said Clark was abandoned, that the Japanese had pulled back to Formosa. Below him is proof that intelligence was dead wrong, or that the Japanese are more desperate than anyone thought, parking their entire air force in the open like they've got planes to spare. His gloved hand hovers over the throttle. 12 B-25s in his squadron, each carrying 6 50 caliber machine guns in the nose. That's 72 guns about to converge on an enemy who's arranged himself for slaughter. All domino flights, Carlson says into his radio, voice steady, professional. Line astern, we're going in. The acknowledgements crackle back. He pushes the yoke forward and the Mitchell's nose drops, the horizon tilting as they descend. 6,000 feet. 4,000. The air gets thicker, warmer. Through the nose, he can see details now. The red circles on the wings, the cockpit canopies, even the tie-down ropes. 2,000 feet. The airfield rushes up to meet them. Guns hot, Kowalski says. Carlson lines up on a row of 3 zeros, his crosshairs walking from the first fighter's propeller spinner down its fuselage. The mathematical part of his brain, the part trained at Randolph Field to calculate deflection and lead, notes the complete absence of ground fire. No tracers rising to meet them. No puffs of flak. They're not even trying to defend it. 1,000 feet. He can see the individual panels on the Zero's fuselage now. The way sun glints off the canopy glass. Carlson squeezes the trigger. The B-25 shudders as all 6 guns open up. The sound like ripping canvas, amplified through the aircraft's frame. His tracers arc down in beautiful lethal curves, and he watches them walk right across the Zero's wing route, up the fuselage, into the engine cowling. Perfect hits. Textbook gunnery. The Zero doesn't explode. Doesn't even smoke. His tracers punch through. He sees them exit the other side, leaving perfectly round holes in the fuselage. The wings don't crumple under the 50 caliber impacts. The fuel tanks don't ignite. The fighter just sits there, absorbing punishment like it's made of... They're fake! Someone screams over the radio. They're fucking fake! Carlson pulls back hard on the yoke, the B-25 clawing for altitude. Through the nose, he sees Kowalski's tracers doing the same thing his did, drilling clean holes through canvas and wood, revealing the skeletal framework underneath. Not aluminum, not metal at all. The radio erupts in confusion. Lieutenant Harris. I put 200 rounds into a Betty and it didn't even... Captain Morrison. Are we seeing this? Sergeant Chen. What the hell are we shooting at? Carlson levels off at 3,000 feet, circling back. Below them, the airfield looks like a carnival shooting gallery after closing time. 50 aircraft sit exactly where they were, except now they are ventilated with thousands of perfectly round holes. Bullet holes that would have shredded real planes, killed real pilots, started real fires. But there's no smoke, no flame, no secondary explosions from fuel or ammunition cooking off. Through his binoculars, Carlson can see it now. Details that were invisible from altitude. The way the propellers don't quite look right. Too uniform. Too perfect. The canopies that reflect sun wrong, like painted glass instead of real plexiglass. The landing gear that sits at slightly incorrect angles. Canvas stretched over wooden frames. paint mixed to match Japanese camouflage schemes, fake guns, fake exhausts, fake aircraft so convincing that even at 50 feet, traveling 200 miles per hour, he'd needed his bullets to tell him the truth. Domino lead. This is Domino 6. Lieutenant Harris sounds sick. How much ammunition did we just— Don't, Carlson cuts him off. He doesn't want to hear the numbers. Not yet. He knows anyway. 12 aircraft, 6 guns each. Approximate rate of fire, 400 rounds per minute. They'd been on target for maybe 3 minutes total. His mental arithmetic puts them at close to 20,000 rounds. 20,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. At roughly $1 per round. Into movie props. The fuel gauge shows they've burned through a third of their load for this mission. Combat radius calculations meant they couldn't linger much longer or they wouldn't make it home. Hours of flight time. Maintenance crews. Intelligence briefings. 12 pilots and 12 bombardiers and 12 gunners all coordinated to attack a target that never existed. Domino flights, form up, Carlson says. We're RTB. Return to base. There's nothing else to do. Can't bomb what isn't real. Can't strafe canvas into submission. As they bank east toward Leyte, Carlson looks back one more time. Somewhere in that tree line, he's certain now, Japanese soldiers are watching. Maybe laughing. Maybe just taking notes on which decoys absorb the most fire. Which ones need better paint jobs. Which angles of approach fooled American pilots most effectively. The humiliation sits in his chest like swallowed glass. His entire military career has been built on certainty. American training. American equipment. American intelligence that tells you where the enemy is so you can apply American firepower to delete them from existence. The equation is supposed to be simple. Locate, attack, destroy, go home. But the Japanese just broke the equation. They didn't beat him in a dogfight, didn't shoot him down, didn't even shoot at him. They just made him waste everything that makes an American bomber dangerous. Fuel, ammunition, time, attention, on absolutely nothing. And it cost them what? Lumber? Canvas? Paint? A few dozen carpenters working for a week. The afternoon sun catches his plexiglass, momentarily blinding. When his vision clears, Leyte is visible on the horizon, real and solid and American. Behind him, Clark Air Base still sits untouched, its Phantom Air Force ready to sucker the next squadron that comes hunting for easy kills. Carlson reaches for his notepad, already composing the after-action report that's going to make him sound insane. The aircraft were so convincing, he'll write, that even at 50 feet, the only thing that gave them away was that our bullets didn't do what bullets do to planes. In the co-pilot seat, Eddie Kowalski breaks the silence. Skipper, you think they'll believe us? Carlson doesn't answer. He's too busy doing math that doesn't make sense. Calculating the cost of American certainty when the enemy makes certainty impossible. When aluminum becomes wood and power becomes pointless and winning a battle means shooting at ghosts while the real war happens somewhere else entirely. The B-25's engines drone on, carrying them home with empty guns and a story no one will want to hear. The photograph floated in the developer tray, edges curling as the chemistry worked. Captain James Way watched the clearing emerge from white nothingness. Trees, grass, shadow. Empty ground. He moved to the next frame. Same clearing. Gun camera timestamp showing 40 minutes later. 6 Japanese fighters sat on the grass. Way's hand stopped halfway to the tongs. He counted again. 6. Type 0 fighters. Wings catching the afternoon light. Positioned like someone had teleported them into existence. Tom. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Tom, what am I looking at here? First Lieutenant Tom Morrison set down his coffee and leaned over the tray, magnifying loupe already in hand. The chemical smell, acetic acid and sulfur, filled the cramped photo reconnaissance lab they'd set up in a requisitioned warehouse outside Sapporo. Through the window, actual rain fell on actual Hokkaido mud. Morrison studied the print, moved to the first frame, back to the second. Jesus Christ. I made 3 passes. Wei pulled the contact sheets from the drying rack. Here's pass 1, empty. Pass 2, 43 minutes later, 6 aircraft. Pass 3, 90 minutes after that, he laid out the third strip, 12 aircraft. Morrison aligned the images under the work light. The clearing was maybe 200 yards across, backed against dense pine forest. In frame 1, nothing. In frame 7, an Air Force. They're building them on site. Morrison's loop traced the edge of one fighter. Look, you can see lumber stacks here, and this. He tapped a dark rectangle. That's not a hangar, that's a sawmill. Wei felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd flown reconnaissance over Japanese facilities for 8 months. He knew what aircraft factories looked like. Sprawling complexes, rail lines, concrete hardstands. This was a clearing in the woods with what looked like furniture workshops scattered under camouflage netting. Morrison grabbed the intelligence log, flipping back through weeks of entries. We've been tracking this location since June. Coded it, Target Hotel 17. His finger ran down the columns. June 8th, 30 identified aircraft. June 29th, 65 aircraft. July 14th, 93 aircraft. And July 23rd? Wei asked, already knowing. 140 aircraft. The math was impossible. Aircraft production didn't work this way. Even Japan's most efficient factories took weeks to assemble a Zero. Required specialized parts shipped from multiple locations. Needed trained workers and precision tools. You didn't go from empty forest to squadron strength in 6 weeks, unless you weren't building real aircraft. Wei pulled the analysis file for Hotel Centene. Someone, probably Morrison, had been meticulously tracking the site. Bombing requests filed. August 3rd, 12 B-29s dispatched. Damage assessment. 17 aircraft destroyed. Heavy fires observed. Follow-up reconnaissance. 3 days later, aircraft count back to pre-strike levels. How much ordnance have we dropped on this location? Wei asked. Morrison checked the strike logs. August 3rd, 36 tons. August 9th, 42 tons. August 17th, that was the big one, 78 tons. He looked up. Total? Maybe 150 tons of high explosive. Wei did the calculation in his head. B-29 operations cost roughly $50,000 per sortie when you factored in fuel, ordnance, maintenance, crew time. Bombs themselves ran $500 to $2,000 each, depending on type. The strikes on Hotel 17 represented maybe $4 million of American resources expended, against what appeared to be lumber and paint. He picked up the magnifying loupe and studied the 6th frame again. This time, he looked differently. Not at the aircraft, but around them. The grass showed no fuel stains, no tire tracks from towing, no blast pens or revetments. The fighters sat in neat rows like someone had placed them with a ruler. Wingtips exactly aligned in a way no real flight line ever maintained. They're not even trying to make it look operational, Wei said. Look, no ground equipment, no fuel trucks. The spacing is perfect. Who parks aircraft perfectly? Morrison leaned in. Someone who wants us to photograph them. The cold feeling in Wei's stomach spread to his chest. This wasn't just deception. This was theater. Japan had built a stage set, populated it with props, and waited for American reconnaissance to take pictures they knew would trigger bombing missions. Wei pulled additional reconnaissance photos from the file. Hotel 17 wasn't unique. Target Baker 22, another forest clearing in Hokkaido. Target Charlie 9, tucked into a mountain valley. Target Delta 31, masquerading as a dispersal field. All showing the same pattern. Rapid aircraft accumulation, minimal infrastructure. bombing followed by impossibly fast recovery. "How many sites are we tracking with this profile?" he asked. Morrison flipped through the master target list. "In Hokkaido alone? 18. Across the home islands?" He kept counting. "Maybe 70. 70 fake airfields. 70 clusters of carpenters churning out wooden fighters. And American bombers had been hitting them for months, convinced they were degrading Japanese air capability." Wei thought about his last mission. 4 hours in the air, photographing what he'd believed were critical military installations. He'd been shot at twice, lost an engine to flak over Hakodate, limped back to base on 3 cylinders. For what? To take pictures of a lumber operation? "Pull the strike damage assessments for all suspected decoy sites," he said. "I want tonnage expended, sortie counts, everything." Morrison already had the summary file open. "June through August, confirmed decoy locations. We've got preliminary damage assessments showing 6,300 tons of ordnance delivered." He paused. "That's not counting missions where we suspected decoys but couldn't confirm. 6,000 tons. Wei pictured it. The B-29s droning north from the Marianas. Crews at battle stations. Bombardiers hunched over their Norden sites, releasing tons of high explosive that would crater empty fields and splinter wooden frameworks that cost Japan maybe $200 each. The real horror wasn't that they'd been fooled. The horror was the efficiency of it. A carpenter in Hokkaido with a saw and some canvas could divert a B-29 that represented hundreds of thousands of dollars in manufacturing costs, thousands of gallons of high-octane fuel, and the time of 10 highly trained crewmen. Japan wasn't trying to stop American bombers. They were trying to waste them. And it was working. Morrison pointed at the map on the wall, bristling with pins marking known Japanese military installations. Red for confirmed real, blue for suspected real, yellow for confirmed fake. If we've been concentrating on yellow pins while blue pins keep producing actual fighters, then we've been losing this war for 3 months and didn't know it," Wei finished. He stared at the photographs spread across the light table. An air force grown from forest floor. Aircraft that assembled faster than trees grew. Japan had discovered something American doctrine hadn't prepared for. You could manufacture targets cheaper than your enemy could destroy them. Wei picked up the phone to call command. Someone needed to know they'd been bombing Phantoms while real Japanese fighters rolled off actual assembly lines, untouched, 40 miles away. The photograph of the empty clearing stared up at him from the developer tray. In 40 minutes, it would be full of fighters again. Wooden ones. Built by carpenters, Japan paid in rice, drawing bombs that cost more than battleships. The Zero materialized at 2 o'clock low, trailing a thin ribbon of smoke from its cowling. First Lieutenant Frank Drury spotted it through the salt-hazed canopy of his Corsair, a lone Japanese fighter limping north toward Kyushu, probably nursing battle damage from the morning's raid on Okinawa. An easy kill to cap off the patrol. Drury banked right, lining up for a high side pass. His wingman, Lieutenant Morrison, called it in. "Tally 1, damaged fighter, bearing north. Moving to engage." But something felt wrong. The Zero wasn't evading. Most damaged aircraft flew erratically. Pilots fighting wounded controls, engines sputtering, desperate weaving to throw off pursuers. This one flew in a perfectly straight line, steady as a passenger liner. Too perfect, too mechanical. Drury eased the throttle back, closing to 300 yards, then 200. The Zero maintained course, unwavering. No evasive action, no dive for the deck. Just that weird, toy-like precision. He centered the gunsight pipper on the fuselage and squeezed the trigger. 6 .50 caliber Brownings roared. Tracers arced across the gap. Drury watched his rounds impact dead center. Good shooting, textbook deflection. But the Zero didn't explode. Didn't burst into flame. The wings didn't crumple. His bullets punched through the fuselage like needles through paper, leaving perfectly circular exit holes that revealed nothing. No fuel spray, no hydraulic fluid, no metal fragments. What the? Drury's voice died in his throat. The rounds were passing clean through canvas, through wood. Morrison, it's a goddamn decoy. He keyed the radio, feeling stupid for wasting ammunition, already planning the embarrassed debrief where he'd explain firing on a... The Zero turned toward him. Not a gentle bank. A direct, deliberate pivot, nose swinging around to point at his Corsair like a compass needle finding magnetic north. The movement was clumsy, unnatural, but utterly intentional. Drury's hands went cold on the stick. Someone on the ground, or in a chase plane he couldn't see, was flying this wooden puppet. And they were trying to ram him. The next 90 seconds rewrote everything Drury understood about decoys. The drone couldn't outmaneuver him. It had maybe a quarter of a real Zero's performance. Slow, heavy, responding to control inputs with the grace of a bathtub. But it didn't need to dogfight. It just needed to hit him once. And whoever was piloting it was doing it with single-minded, terrifying focus. Drury broke hard left. The drone followed, its turn radius pathetic, but its intent absolute. He pulled 4 Gs, the Corsair's big wings biting air, opening distance. The wooden Zero kept coming, slower now, but locked on his tail position like it had radar. Morrison, break off! Thing's trying to ram me! Say again. It's radio-controlled. It's a... Drury saw the drone correct its heading, tracking him through the turn. It's a goddamn guided missile! He reversed hard right, pulling the Corsair through a barrel roll that should have shaken anything short of an ace. The drone fell behind, its crude controls unable to match the maneuver. Drury came out of the roll with angles, with position, with the decoy centered in his gun sight at 150 yards. He held the trigger down. All 6 guns. No precision shooting this time. Just overwhelming firepower punching through wood and canvas and whatever radio equipment was stuffed inside. The Zero shuddered under the impacts. Fabric peeled away in long strips. A control surface separated. The nose dropped. At 1,500 feet, it came apart completely. Not an explosion, just structural disintegration. The drone transformed from aircraft into debris cloud. Splinters and torn canvas fluttering down toward the East China Sea like confetti. Drury's hands were shaking. Morrison pulled alongside, close enough that Drury could see his wingman's face through the canopy. Pale, eyes wide. Did that thing just try to kill you? Yeah. Drury's voice sounded distant in his own ears. Yeah, it did. They flew in silence for 30 seconds, watching the debris scatter across the water. Finally, Morrison keyed his radio again. Frank, we just got attacked by a wooden airplane. Drury stared at the empty sky where the drone had been. His Corsair had burned maybe 400 rounds destroying it. Call it $200 worth of ammunition at 3 cents per round. Plus the fuel for the intercept, plus the time, added up, and he'd just spent probably $500 in American resources killing something that cost Japan maybe $150 to build. But that wasn't the part that made his hands shake. The part that made his hands shake was that it had almost worked. If he'd been slower on the brake, if the drone had been slightly faster, if the operator on the ground had been a little more skilled, that wooden puppet could have taken out a $50,000 Corsair and a trained Marine pilot who'd cost the Corps years to produce. Japan had figured out how to turn their cheapest asset, wood and fabric, into a weapon that could kill their enemy's most expensive one. Not by making the decoy better, by making it suicidal. Drury reached for his knee board and started writing his after-action report, the pencil unsteady in his grip. He kept crossing out words, trying to find language that wouldn't make him sound insane. Engaged what appeared to be damaged Zero fighter at 1430 hours. Upon firing, target revealed to be decoy, construction, wood, and canvas. Decoy then maneuvered to intercept, exhibiting radio-controlled flight. Assessed as ramming attack. Destroyed target after sustained fire. He paused, then added a final line that he knew would raise eyebrows back at the debriefing tent. Recommend all units be advised. Not all Japanese aircraft are manned. Some are decoys. Some are weapons. Some are both. Advise, destroy everything that flies. Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. We telling them about this? Drury looked at the words he'd just written. A wooden airplane had tried to kill him. It hadn't been a joke or a trick. It had been a deliberate attack, as real as any Zero with a pilot in the cockpit. Maybe more dangerous, because the operator had nothing to lose. No fear of death. No survival instinct. Just a puppet on strings, willing to trade itself for any American plane it could reach. Yeah, Drury said. We're telling them. They need to know what they're making us fight. Below, the last pieces of the drone hit the water and disappeared. Drury turned for home, his ammunition counters reading nearly empty, his fuel gauge lower than he'd like, both spent on an enemy that had never been alive to begin with. The Japanese had figured out something terrifying. The cheapest weapon in war isn't the one that kills the most enemies. It's the one that forces your enemy to waste his most expensive weapons on ghosts. And they'd just upgraded their ghosts to fight back. The briefing room in Guam smells like chalk dust and stale cigarette smoke. Colonel David Richardson shifts in his metal folding chair, uniform already soaked through at the armpits despite the fan rattling overhead. These intelligence summaries usually run 20 minutes. Production estimates, sortie effectiveness, the usual graphs and percentages that blur together after 3 years of Pacific War. Then, Lieutenant Morrison writes the first number on the blackboard. Japan's total investment in decoy program, $2,000. Richardson sits up slightly. That's nothing. Pocket change. The cost of maybe 80 real fighters. Morrison's chalk squeaks across the board, building the equation. Estimated U.S. ordnance expended on decoy targets, 6,000 tons. Cost of ordnance, alone $18,000. Fuel for diverted sorties, $8,000. Aircraft. Depreciation and maintenance, $12,000. The lieutenant steps back, revealing the bottom line. Total American response. Cost, $82,000. Conservative estimate. Someone coughs. The fan rattles. Richardson stares at the numbers until they stop being numbers and become something obscene. Gentlemen, Morrison's voice is flat, drained. For every dollar Japan spent building wooden airplanes, we spent approximately $40 trying to destroy them. The ratio sits there on the blackboard like an accusation. 40-1. Richardson has authorized bombing runs that each cost more than Japan's entire decoy operation. He pictures some Japanese carpenter in a forest clearing, hammer in hand, looking up at the sky and laughing. It gets worse, Morrison says, which seems impossible until he pins up a map of the home islands. Red dots scatter across Kyushu and Hokkaido. Confirmed decoy sites. Blue dots mark actual aircraft production facilities, identified through signals intelligence and prisoner interrogation. Then Morrison overlays a sheet of translucent paper shaded in green. This shows concentration of bombing sorties for June and July, based on target priority assignments. The green blob sits almost perfectly on top of the red dots. The blue dots, the real factories, stand clean and untouched, 40 to 50 miles away from the heaviest bombardment patterns. Richardson feels something cold settle in his chest. It's not anger, not even embarrassment. It's worse than that. It's admiration. Hotel 17 in Hokkaido. Morrison taps a particularly dense cluster of red dots. We hit it 6 times, dropped 150 tons of high explosive. Post-strike reconnaissance showed extensive damage, so we moved it down the priority list. He pauses. The actual Nakajima plant was operating 12 miles west the entire time. We photographed it twice, but intelligence flagged it as a furniture factory. It was a furniture factory, someone mutters. They were just making airplanes out of furniture. No one laughs. Morrison continues, merciless. Target Victor 23, the airfield complex near Sapporo. We assigned 18 B-29s, 3 separate missions. The decoys there cost Japan maybe $1,200 in materials and labor. We spent $4 million bombing them. The aircraft we committed to those strikes could have hit the Kawanishi plant at Konan, actual seaplane production. Instead, that facility operated at 70% capacity for 2 additional months. Richardson watches a captain in the front row doing arithmetic on his notepad, his pencil moving faster and faster. The man's face has gone pale. Total estimated sorties diverted to decoy targets. 15,000, Morrison says it quietly, which somehow makes it worse. That's 15,000 missions where our most expensive weapon, a fully loaded B-29 with a 9-man crew, spent its payload on targets that cost less to build than the fuel we burned getting there. The captain's pencil snaps. The sound cracks through the room like a rifle shot. How did they do it? Richardson hears himself ask. How did they expand capacity that fast? Morrison pulls down a series of blown-up reconnaissance photos. The images show the same clearing over 4 consecutive days. Day 1, empty forest. Day 2, wooden frameworks. Day 3, completed fuselages. Day 4, fully painted aircraft with rising sun insignias arranged in perfect dispersal patterns. They decentralized production, didn't try to build them in factories we could target. Instead, they distributed the work to carpenters, furniture makers, art students. Anyone who could work wood and canvas, Morrison's finger traces the photos. One site in Hokkaido went from 0 aircraft to 47 in 11 days. No supply trains, no infrastructure, just lumber from the surrounding forest and workers who could build a 0 in 48 hours. Christ, someone whispers. They're growing the damn things. Faster than we can kill them, Morrison agrees. And every fake aircraft we bomb is a real target we didn't hit. We estimate that decoy operations successfully diverted strikes from approximately 200 high-value industrial targets during the June-August period alone. Richardson thinks about his morning briefing, where they'd congratulated themselves on air superiority, on destroying 60% of Japan's identified aircraft in 3 months of sustained operations. The numbers had looked beautiful. They'd been bombing a forest. The Mitsubishi plant at Nagoya, Morrison continues, and now his voice carries something like wonder. Actual fighter production facility. We had it marked for strikes in July. Then, photo reconnaissance identified a major aircraft concentration 40 miles north. Over 100 fighters. Looked like a dispersal field protecting the plant approaches. We shifted sorties to hit the dispersal field first. Standard doctrine. Suppression before main target. He doesn't need to finish. Richardson can see it in the map. The dispersal field is marked with a red dot. Nagoya produced an estimated 80 additional fighters while we were bombing wooden ones nearby. Those fighters are now defending the home islands. They're killing our crews. The room has gone completely silent. Even the fan seems quieter. A major in the back speaks up, his voice careful. Sir, with respect, couldn't we have distinguished decoys from real aircraft with better intelligence protocols? More rigorous photo analysis? Morrison looks at him with something like pity. Major, show him the comparison photos. An enlisted man pins up 2 images side by side. Both show Japanese fighters on an airfield, shot from 8,000 feet. Richardson squints. The aircraft look identical. Same proportions, same shadows, same dispersal patterns. Left is Clark Field, October 1944, Morrison says. All decoys. Right is Atsugi, July 1945. All real. The decoys were built by art students using photographs of actual aircraft. They included authentic details. Panel lines, gun ports, even oil stains painted under the engines. At standard reconnaissance altitude, the miss rate for photo interpreters was 89%, meaning 9 times out of 10, we couldn't tell. The major says nothing. They weaponized our own doctrine against us, Morrison continues. We couldn't not bomb identified targets. That's not how we fight. We see enemy aircraft, we destroy enemy aircraft.
Japan understood this. They built an air force specifically designed to be seen, to be targeted, to draw our most expensive responses to their cheapest decoys. Richardson stares at the 40-to-1 ratio, still on the
blackboard. The arithmetic is devastating. Japan couldn't match American production, so they'd made American production irrelevant. They'd turned the bombing campaign into a grotesque game where the only way to win was to waste so many resources that eventually America would run out of things to bomb. Except America wouldn't run out. That was the horror. They could keep bombing forever, dropping millions of dollars of ordnance on hundreds of dollars of lumber, and the only limit would be how fast Japan could make targets. Final assessment, Morrison says. The Japanese decoy program represents the most cost-effective defensive operation in the Pacific theater, possibly in the entire war. They achieved a force multiplication factor we can only guess at. Every dollar they spent probably saved them $40 in prevented damage to real facilities. They diverted approximately 20% of our bombing capacity for 4 months using a program that cost less than a single aircraft carrier. He sets down his chalk. The white dust on his fingers looks like ash. Gentlemen, they beat us, not militarily, economically. They found the one way a poor nation could fight a rich one, make the rich nation waste its wealth on nothing. Richardson stands slowly, his knees popping. He walks to the map, studies the green-shaded bombing patterns covering red decoy sites while blue factory dots sit pristine. Someone in the back asks the question nobody wants answered. Sir, what if they'd put this same creativity into building real fighters? Richardson touches the map, his finger on a blue dot marked Kawanishi Seaplane Works, active production. Lieutenant, he says quietly, they did something smarter. They built an air force we couldn't not attack. One that cost them almost nothing and cost us everything. And it worked. The briefing room empties slowly, officers filing out in silence. Richardson stays behind, staring at the numbers on the blackboard. 40-to-1. He thinks about Bob Carlson emptying his guns into wooden planes, about James Way photographing factories that were theatrical sets, about Frank Drury dogfighting a puppet. The Japanese hadn't beaten American technology or courage or even strategy. They'd beaten American mathematics with better mathematics. They'd turned abundance itself into a vulnerability. Richardson picks up the chalk, adds one more line to Morrison's equation. Cost to Japan of making America, waste $82,000. $2,000. American resources diverted from actual war production. Incalculable. He sets down the chalk and walks out, leaving the obscene arithmetic behind for the next briefing, the next set of targets, the next calculation that will probably be just as wrong. Behind him, the fan rattles on, stirring air thick with the dust of things that were never really there. The museum is quiet at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. Robert Carlson stands in front of the wooden zero, alone, except for a school group disappearing, around the corner toward the Pacific Theater exhibits. The docent told him this particular aircraft was built in the Philippines in late 1944, part of a batch of 50 that drew American bombers away from real installations for 6 weeks. Carlson reaches out, then hesitates. The rope barrier is just for show. The sign says, "Please do not touch." But there's no alarm, no guard watching. His fingertips brush the canvas skin. It's coarser than he expected, more like sailcloth than the fabric covering a Piper Cub. The paint is smooth, though. The mottled green camouflage pattern still visible after 43 years. His bullets went through this. Not this exact aircraft, but its identical twin brothers lined up at Clark Field. 20,000 rounds, he'd estimated in his after-action report. The number had seemed impossible even as he wrote it. Clark Field? October 1944? Carlson turns. The voice is accented but clear. A Japanese man roughly his age stands 3 feet away, reading the embroidered text on Carlson's veteran cap. 345th Bomb Group. Pacific Theater. Yes, Carlson says. I flew that mission. The man steps closer to the decoy, his expression unreadable. He's wearing slacks and a cardigan, completely ordinary, but something in the way he looks at the wooden zero suggests intimacy. "I was in the tree line," the man says. "I watched you strafe the field. I was terrified you would discover us after you realized the deception. But you just pulled up and left." Carlson's mouth goes dry. "You built these?" "Hi, yes." The man extends his hand. "Takeo Nakamura. I supervised decoy construction in Luzon, October through December 1944. They shake. Nakamura's grip is firm, his palm rough. Carpenter's hands, even now. "How many?" Carlson asks. "Our team? 143 aircraft in 6 weeks. Nakamura says it without pride, just stating fact. We had 16 carpenters, 11 art students from Manila who knew how to mix paint, and lumber from a furniture factory we dismantled. The Zero fighter took 12 hours start to finish if we had proper plans. The Betty bomber took 20 hours because of the size." Carlson does the mathematics silently. 12 hours, a real Zero, took 3,000 hours of skilled labor, precision tooling, aluminum alloys shipped from Japan. Nakamura's team was building fake aircraft faster than Mitsubishi could produce real ones. "How much did it cost?" Carlson asks. "One of these?" Nakamura considers. "Materials, perhaps 200 pesos? 50 American dollars at the exchange rate. Labor was soldiers who would be paid regardless, so that cost nothing extra." $50. Carlson remembers the briefing slides from 1946, the ones Colonel Richardson had circulated to all squadron commanders after the war. The cost of ammunition they'd expended at Clark Field, $43,000. The fuel for the mission, $8,000. The opportunity cost of not hitting real targets that day, incalculable. They stand together, looking at the wooden aircraft. Close up, the deception seems obvious. The engine cowling is just painted plywood. The canopy is clear shellac over a wooden frame, completely unconvincing. The landing gear is 2x4s bolted together. "From 50 feet up," Carlson says quietly, "in a B-25 doing 200 knots, this looked perfect. Even after we hit it, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. I kept expecting fire." "The Americans did burn some," Nakamura says. "Your incendiary rounds would set the canvas ablaze. But we learned to separate the decoys, create fire breaks, and we could rebuild a burned aircraft in 8 hours. Much faster than the first construction because the frame could be salvaged." A family walks past. Father, mother, 2 children. The kids glance at the Zero, then immediately lose interest and drag their parents toward the bombers in the next gallery. Neither Carlson nor Nakamura moves. "I need to tell you something," Nakamura says finally. His voice has changed, become quieter. "The base you attacked, Clark Field. We knew you were coming." Carlson looks at him sharply. "Not the specific day, but we knew American reconnaissance was photographing the area. We knew bombers would come, so we positioned all our decoys, 50 aircraft, exactly where your pilots would see them from 8,000 feet. And we moved the 12 real fighters to a small auxiliary strip 7 kilometers north, hidden under camouflage netting in a palm grove. 12 real planes," Carlson says. 12. Nakamura nods. "Operating planes, with fuel and ammunition. They flew missions against your positions on Leyte for 6 more weeks until we evacuated Luzon. Those 12 aircraft, I learned later, shot down 3 American bombers. Maybe a fighter. I'm not certain of all the results. 3 bombers. 30 men, give or take." Carlson's hands are shaking slightly. He puts them in his pockets. "So, your 50 decoys, built for less than what we spend on a Jeep, kept 12 real fighters operational. And those 12 fighters killed my countrymen." "Yes." Nakamura's voice is almost a whisper. "But I tell myself, if you had not attacked my wooden airplanes, you would have attacked something else. A real airfield. A real factory. You would have killed real people. Japanese soldiers, yes, but also Filipino workers, perhaps civilians near the targets. He's silent for a moment, then continues. I built 143 aircraft. By my calculation, they drew perhaps 60 American bombing raids away from real installations. 60 raids that would have destroyed actual infrastructure, killed actual people. So in a terrible way, my fake airplanes may have saved lives. Japanese lives, certainly. But also, he pauses, if your bombers had hit real targets instead of my decoys, more real fighters would have been destroyed. Which means fewer fighters to oppose your attacks. Which means fewer Americans shot down. Carlson stares at the wooden zero. The logic is perverse, circular, impossible to parse. Are you saying, he says slowly, that you saved American lives by tricking us into wasting our resources? I don't know. Nakamura's voice cracks slightly. I tell myself this because otherwise I spent 2 years of war building toys while my country burned. I need to believe the deception had purpose beyond simple trickery. A docent appears, making rounds. She sees 2 old men standing before the zero, talking quietly, and moves on without interrupting. We figured it out eventually, Carlson says. By mid-1945, our photo reconnaissance could spot the decoys. Different paint degradation patterns. No exhaust stains. The spacing was always too perfect. Real air bases are messy. I read about this, Nakamura says. The technical reports were published after the war. Very impressive analysis. By then you'd already won. Carlson's voice is flat. Not the war, but the resource battle. We diverted 20% of our bombing capacity for 4 months. $80 million of ordnance on targets that cost you $2 million to create. Colonel Richardson showed us the math in 1946. I wanted to throw up. Nakamura looks at him. I'm sorry, don't be. Carlson shakes his head. You did your job. I did mine. We were both trying to kill each other with the tools we had. You just had better tools for the resources available. They stand in silence. The museum's ventilation system hums. Somewhere distant, a child shrieks with delight at something in another gallery. I have a question, Carlson says. Did you believe you could win? In October 1944, building wooden airplanes while we controlled the skies, did you actually think Japan could win the war? Nakamura is quiet for a long time. No, he says finally. I knew we would lose. Everyone knew, though we couldn't say it. But we could slow you down. Make the victory expensive. Perhaps expensive enough that you would negotiate instead of invade. He gestures at the decoy. This was all we had left. Tricks, deception. The mathematics of making you waste more than we spent. It worked, Carlson says. For a while. For a while, Nakamura agrees. But not enough. Carlson checks his watch. His wife is meeting him at the museum entrance in 10 minutes. He should go. But he can't quite leave, not yet. Do you ever regret it? He asks. The deception? Nakamura touches the wooden wing, his fingers gentle. Every day. And never. It was brilliant, and it was shameful. It saved lives, and it prolonged dying. I am proud of the craftsmanship and ashamed of the purpose. He looks at Carlson. War makes us all into liars in one way or another. I just built my lies from lumber and canvas instead of words. Carlson nods slowly. He understands this in a way he couldn't have 40 years ago. The clean narratives have long since fallen apart. Victory didn't feel like victory when you learned you'd spent 4 months bombing furniture projects while real threats operated untouched. Thank you, he says finally, for telling me about the 12 fighters. I didn't know that part. I'm sorry for their crews, Nakamura says quietly. The Americans they killed. I think about them sometimes. Wonder if they had families. They shake hands again. 2 old men before a wooden airplane that cost less than the fuel burned trying to destroy it. The mathematics have never resolved. The equation balances differently depending on which side you stood, which losses you count, which victories you claim. Carlson turns to leave, then stops. The thing is, he says, I can't decide if you were the smartest people in the war or the most desperate. Nakamura smiles, sad and knowing. Both, Colonel Carlson. We were both. Carlson walks toward the exit, leaving Nakamura behind.